I was caught in a private moment by my mom. What happened next changed our relationship forever. I never thought that one moment of sheer embarrassment could change everything between me and my mom. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd ever expect to happen, but here I was, locked in an awkward silence with the person who had always been my closest confidant. What should have been a summer of freedom turned into a tangled mess of discomfort and forced boundaries. All it took was one accidental knock on my door, and my entire world was turned upside down. Summer had finally arrived, and I couldn't have been more excited. My dad was away on a 3-month work trip, leaving the house practically all to me. As a second-year college student, I was looking forward to these months of complete freedom. No assignments, no deadlines, no obligations. I had been dreaming of this moment for so long, a time where I could just do whatever I wanted without anyone around to interrupt. My mom, Jessica, had recently come back from a visit with some friends, but she was always out running errands or doing whatever it was that kept her busy. This left the house all to myself, and I loved the quiet. I could take the time to relax, do what I wanted, or just zone out in my room without the weight of anyone else's expectations. Everything seemed perfect. But little did I know, that would all come crashing down in an instant. It was just another quiet day. I was in my room, enjoying the solitude and doing nothing in particular, just zoning out, scrolling through my phone, feeling like I had all the time in the world. The door was locked, and I was certain I had hours before anyone would come home. It felt like the perfect moment, the kind of freedom I'd been craving all semester. But then, out of nowhere, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door unlocking. A wave of panic hit me instantly. Mom was back early. My heart raced as I quickly glanced around the room, desperately looking for something to distract myself with. But I was frozen. I heard her footsteps getting closer, and my mind went blank. I couldn't think of anything but the reality of the situation. There was no way I could cover up what I was doing, no way to escape the inevitable. The door creaked open slowly, and I froze completely. "Alec!" Her voice was filled with surprise, but underneath it I could hear confusion. "What are you... Oh my God!" The shock in her voice made my stomach drop. I tried to move, to explain, but nothing came out. I was mortified. My mind raced, but no words could form. Before I could even react, Jessica quickly stepped back, closing the door behind her. I was left in complete silence, my heart pounding in my ears. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, but the one thing I could focus on was how could I face her now. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. How could I possibly explain this? My mother had just walked in on me at the worst possible moment, and now there was this unspoken tension between us. I couldn't even bring myself to move. I just sat there, my mind a blur of embarrassment and confusion. After what felt like an agonizingly long silence, I finally mustered the courage to leave my room. My legs felt shaky, and I honestly thought I might collapse before I could even make it down the hall. Every step felt heavy, as if the weight of the situation was pressing down on me. I was about to face her, my mom, who I had always felt I could talk to about anything, and I had no idea how to make it right. When I found her in the kitchen, she was standing by the counter holding a cup of tea. Her face was calm, but I could tell she was just as uncomfortable as I was. The silence between us was deafening. I stood in the doorway for a moment, not sure how to begin. "I'm really sorry, Mom," I finally said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I couldn't meet her eyes. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon." There was a long pause before she spoke. "It's okay, Alec," she replied, her voice measured and calm. "I wasn't expecting it either, but I understand. You're an adult now, and these things happen." I was shocked at how calm she was. No anger, no yelling, just a kind of strange understanding in her voice. Still, the weight of the situation hung in the air, and I could tell that neither of us really knew how to move forward from this. The rest of the evening was filled with strained silence. We both went through the motions, pretending like nothing had happened, but it felt like there was an invisible wall between us now. I could feel it in every word, every glance. I was terrified that this moment would haunt our relationship forever. Make sure to like the video and subscribe so you never miss more shocking and real stories like this one. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. The events of the previous day were still fresh in my mind, and I couldn't shake the discomfort that had settled between me and Mom. The whole day had a strange, heavy feeling to it. I tried to act normal, focusing on anything that could distract me from the awkwardness, but it wasn't easy. Every time I looked at my mom, I felt a wave of guilt and uncertainty. Breakfast, something that usually felt routine and comfortable, was now filled with silence. Normally, we didn't talk much in the mornings, but today, the silence felt oppressive. I avoided looking her way, and I'm pretty sure she was doing the same. It was like we were both pretending nothing had changed, when in reality, everything had. I couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. Did she feel the same way I did? Was she just as uncomfortable as I was? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no idea how to deal with this. I wasn't sure how to act around her anymore, and the thought of facing her after everything made me feel uneasy. It wasn't until after breakfast that she decided it was time to talk. She put down her coffee cup and looked over at me. "Alec," she said, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." I froze. My heart raced. I didn't want to have this conversation. I didn't even know where to start. But it was clear that avoiding it wasn't going to help either of us. "I know this is awkward for you," she began, choosing her words carefully. "It's awkward for me, too. But I don't want to leave things unspoken between us." I nodded, my throat dry. "I don't know what to say, Mom," I replied, barely able to meet her eyes. "I understand that you're growing up," she continued, her voice softening. "With that comes certain things. What happened yesterday? It wasn't something we expected, but I don't want you to feel ashamed or embarrassed about it." I could feel the tension in my chest. I wanted to speak, to explain how much the whole situation was bothering me, but the words didn't come. Instead, I just listened as she continued, trying to be as composed as possible. "I don't know exactly how we move past this," she admitted, "but I want you to know that you can talk to me about anything. You don't have to hide things from me, no judgment, okay?" Her words, though kind, didn't erase the awkwardness that lingered in the air. The tension between us was palpable, and I wasn't sure how to make it go away. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, my voice barely audible. "This is just weird." She smiled slightly, but there was still unease in her eyes. "Yeah, it is weird, but we'll figure it out. We just need to set some boundaries so this doesn't happen again." I nodded, relieved that she was trying to handle it in a way that was calm and reasonable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same. The days that followed were filled with an unsettling sense of normalcy. Mom and I both tried to act like everything was fine, but the truth was, things had shifted between us. The boundaries we had talked about felt like an attempt to patch up something that had already been broken. It was clear that neither of us knew how to navigate this new, awkward dynamic. Every time I walked past her, I could feel her eyes on me, as if she was constantly trying to gauge how I was feeling. It wasn't like before, when we could communicate without words. Now it felt like there was this invisible wall between us, built from our awkward conversation and the discomfort we hadn't fully addressed. I spent more time in my room, avoiding the kitchen and the living room. It wasn't that I didn't want to be around my mom. I just didn't know how to be around her anymore. The space that had once felt like home now felt suffocating, and I didn't know how to make it better. Every time she tried to start a conversation, I found myself withdrawing, unsure of how much was too much, or whether we were crossing lines we shouldn't be. Mom, on the other hand, kept trying. I could tell she was doing her best to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was hard for her too. She would occasionally come into my room to check on me, bringing small gifts or asking if I wanted to go out. But her attempts at reconnecting felt forced, as if she was trying too hard to act like everything was okay when we both knew it wasn't. The worst part was that, despite everything, I felt like I couldn't talk to her about what had happened. How could I? How could I even bring it up again without feeling like we were reopening a wound that had barely started to heal? Then one afternoon, about a week after the incident, Mom came into my room again. This time, she didn't bring a cup of tea or some small talk. She just sat down on my bed and looked at me quietly for a moment, her eyes soft but tired. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice hesitant. "I think we need to have a real conversation about what happened." I was taken aback. I didn't expect this. "What do you mean?" I asked, unsure of how to react. "I mean," she continued, "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable in your own home, and I don't want you to feel like you can't come to me with anything. But I also think we need to figure out how we're going to move forward from here." I stayed quiet, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to just say everything was fine, to move on and forget the whole thing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the right answer. "We need boundaries, Alec," she said softly. "And not just boundaries between us, but boundaries for you as well. You're an adult now, and I need to respect your privacy. But we also need to understand each other better, so we don't let something like this happen again." I nodded, not really sure what to say. There were so many things I wanted to say, but I felt so lost in the situation that I wasn't sure what the right words were anymore. The weeks continued to drag on, and while the tension between Mom and me never fully went away, we both tried to keep up the pretense that everything was fine. It was like we had an unspoken agreement to pretend things were back to normal, but it felt like a thin layer of ice that could crack at any moment. We'd share short conversations, but they never really reached the depth they used to. There was always this weird distance now, something that lingered whenever we were in the same room together. It wasn't that we were fighting, but there was a constant underlying feeling of discomfort. I found myself retreating more into my own world. I stayed in my room longer, tried to keep busy, and avoided the spaces we used to share. It wasn't because I hated her or didn't want to be around her, but it was the only way I could process everything. The awkwardness felt overwhelming, and the last thing I wanted to do was make it worse by forcing conversations that neither of us were ready for. Mom continued to make small gestures to bridge the gap. She'd leave little notes for me, asking if I wanted to join her for dinner or if I needed anything. There were moments when I appreciated it, but each time I felt like we were dancing around the truth. We were trying to move forward, but neither of us knew how. One evening after dinner, I finally decided to break the silence. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. She turned to me, surprised but relieved. "Okay, what's on your mind, Alec?" I hesitated. I don't know how we move past this. I don't know how to pretend everything's fine when it feels like everything's different now. Her face softened and she nodded slowly. "I feel it too," she said, her voice quiet. "But I want to find a way to move forward. I don't want this to be the thing that defines our relationship." I didn't know what the right answer was, but I knew that talking was the first step. We both had to face the awkwardness, no matter how uncomfortable it was. After that conversation, things started to change. Slowly, but they changed. We began to have more open discussions, but it was clear that the dynamic had shifted. There was still a layer of awkwardness, but we were at least trying to understand each other. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table, a pile of bills in front of her. It was one of those rare moments when she wasn't rushing off to errands or meetings. I hesitated for a moment before walking over and sitting down across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "And I know it's not easy for either of us. But I think we're both doing the best we can to move forward. I want to make sure you're comfortable here." I nodded, though part of me felt uncertain. The words sounded nice, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The closeness we had shared before seemed distant now, and I wasn't sure how to regain it. "I appreciate that, Mom," I said, "but it's hard. I don't know how to get back to the way things were." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "I know, Alec. I wish I had a magic answer for you, but I don't. All I can promise is that I'm trying. We'll figure it out together." Her words were reassuring, but I wasn't sure if I believed them fully. It felt like we were both walking on eggshells, unsure of how to move forward without breaking something else in the process. We spent the next few weeks like that, trying, but still stumbling through the awkwardness. I focused on keeping busy with my own life, and Mom did the same. We didn't talk much outside of the occasional check-in or small talk, but it felt like we were both waiting for some sign that everything would go back to normal. It wasn't until one evening, about a month later, that something small but significant happened. I was in the living room, flipping through a magazine, when Mom came in. She sat down next to me, not saying anything at first. For the first time since everything had happened, I didn't feel that familiar weight in the air. It was just comfortable. She reached over and patted my leg, giving me a small, sincere smile. "I know we're still figuring things out," she said quietly, "but I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Always." Something about that moment clicked for me. The tension didn't vanish, but the walls between us seemed to come down, if only a little. It was the beginning of something. I wasn't sure what, but I knew that it was a step forward. In the weeks that followed, we both made small efforts to rebuild our connection, though it wasn't easy. Every time I saw Mom, I couldn't help but feel that we were living in a delicate balance, like we were both waiting for something to crack again. But as time passed, it became clear that we couldn't go back to the way things had been. That relationship, the one where we could talk freely without hesitation, was gone. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. We weren't the same people we were before the incident, but that didn't mean we couldn't create something new. There was still love between us, despite the awkwardness, despite the shame that lingered. And we both started to realize that this was just another phase of our relationship. It wasn't ideal, but it was real. I made a conscious effort to spend more time with her, even if it meant stepping out of my comfort zone. We'd watch TV together, or grab coffee at the corner cafe. Nothing major, but it was a step in the right direction. The tension didn't disappear overnight, but these small daily moments began to chip away at the awkwardness. One afternoon, Mom suggested we cook dinner together. The idea caught me off guard. Normally, I would have shrugged it off and retreated to my room, but something in me said, "This is what we need." So, I agreed, even though I wasn't sure how it would go. We worked in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces, exchanging small talk here and there. The silence was comfortable, not heavy like before. I caught myself laughing at something Mom said, and I realized it had been a while since we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We weren't pretending that everything was fine, but we were learning to live with the discomfort and move through it. Later, as we sat down to eat, I couldn't help but smile. Despite everything that had happened, despite all the awkwardness, there was a quiet understanding between us. We didn't need to talk about the past, we just needed to keep moving forward. "I know things haven't been easy," Mom said, setting down her fork, "but I'm proud of us for working through it." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Yeah, me too." And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Maybe we would never get back to the way things were before, but we were moving forward. We were finding our new normal. Despite the moments of quiet understanding, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there were still things left unsaid. Sure, Mom and I were learning how to move forward, but that lingering tension always hung in the air. It wasn't like we were ignoring it. No, we were both trying to act as if everything was fine. But deep down, I felt that uneasy undercurrent, a reminder that something had shifted permanently between us. The truth was, we were still both pretending that this was all just a phase we could laugh off and forget. But that moment of complete embarrassment, her walking in on me, had done something to our relationship that I wasn't sure would ever be fully repaired. One evening, a few weeks later, I was sitting on the couch going through some work emails on my laptop when Mom entered the room. She was quiet for a while, standing there with her hands folded in front of her. The moment stretched on longer than it should have. I couldn't help but glance up at her, wondering if she was about to bring up the awkwardness again. "I've been thinking," she began softly, breaking the silence, "about everything. About us." I swallowed hard. "Mom, we've been over this. We're fine." She shook her head gently. "No, Alec, we're not fine. And pretending like we are isn't helping either of us." Her words hit me like a punch. The frustration, the tension, the stuff we'd been tiptoeing around for weeks. It all came to the surface. I closed my laptop, focusing all my attention on her. "Then what do you want, Mom?" I asked, my voice low. "What do you think we need to do?" "I think we need to finally be honest with each other," she said, taking a deep breath. "Not just about what happened, but about how we move forward. We're both walking around like this huge thing is hanging over us, and it's not healthy." I couldn't deny it. She was right. We couldn't just keep pretending that everything was fine when there was this silent weight between us. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "I feel like I don't even know how to talk to you anymore." She sat beside me on the couch, placing her hand on mine. "Alec, I don't want you to feel that way. We've always been close, and I don't want to lose that. But we can't keep acting like the elephant in the room doesn't exist. We need to address it." I sat there, letting her words sink in. It felt like the world was spinning, and yet in that moment, I felt something shift. Not necessarily for the better, but for something that was more honest. We were facing the truth now, and as uncomfortable as it was the only way we could move forward. The next few days after our conversation felt different. There was a sense of clarity between us now, though it didn't come without its own set of challenges. We both knew that the awkwardness hadn't gone away completely, but the fact that we were finally acknowledging the discomfort made it easier to breathe. Mom and I continued to spend time together, but it wasn't just about trying to fill the silence anymore. It felt more intentional. We would sit down and talk, not always about the big things, but about the small things too. The way my day had been, the things she was doing around the house, just casual stuff that made us feel like we weren't strangers trying to tiptoe around each other. One evening, while we were watching a movie, Mom turned to me with a quiet smile. "I know this hasn't been easy for you, Alec, and I just want to say again that I'm really sorry for how things have been. I'm glad we're finally being open about it." I nodded, giving her a small smile in return. "Yeah, me too. It still feels weird, but it's getting better." Mom's eyes softened. "I just want you to know, no matter what happens, we'll always figure it out. We're family, and even when it's hard, that matters more than anything." Her words meant a lot to me. I was starting to realize that healing was not going to happen overnight. There would still be moments of discomfort, times when things would feel off. But as long as we were willing to keep talking, there was a chance we could rebuild. I wasn't sure what the future would look like for us, whether we'd ever fully return to how things used to be, or if we would continue to navigate this strange new dynamic. But for the first time since that horrible moment, I felt like there was hope. Hope that we could find our new normal, even if it was different from what we had before. As the weeks passed, the weight of that uncomfortable silence slowly started to fade. It wasn't perfect, and there were still awkward moments here and there, but it felt manageable. The boundaries we set had given us space, and while we didn't always know how to cross it, we were figuring it out one step at a time. I still didn't have all the answers, but I knew this. We were learning to understand each other again, and maybe that was enough. Have you ever had an awkward situation with someone you love? How did you move past it? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more real stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Let's talk about the uncomfortable stuff. We're all in this together.